Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Melissa, and this is a video um, about forgiving your emotionally immature parents. Again, my name is Melissa. I will start by telling you a little bit about myself. I am a healer. I help emotionally neglected women find the right level of emotional and physical contact with their families that's right for them, without years in therapy, so that they can stop putting all of their time and energy into their families and start putting it into themselves and their own dreams and their own goals. And often these women, emotionally neglected women, feel emotionally neglected because of growing up with an emotionally immature parents. So that's why we're here today. Um, Another thing I want to mention before I jump in is that I'm here helping women who've grown up emotionally neglected, partly because of my own experience, and partly because I see that there are not a lot of resources for coping with emotional neglect. Um, and I'd like to change that. So, to that end, I would really like to build something to help. And I don't want to do it in a vacuum. So, I need some help. I have been conducting research interviews with women who identify as being emotionally neglected, to learn about their hopes, their dreams, their challenges, their frustrations, and what kind of solutions they're looking for. So if this resonates with you and you would be willing to help me out, it would be a 30-minute interview over Zoom. I've put a link in the chat. And it is not a sales call. It is simply a research call so that I can learn more about other women's experience with emotional neglect. So thank you in advance. All right, so let's jump in. Why the topic of forgiveness around emotionally immature parents? A couple of reasons. I feel that this is a topic that is misunderstood. The whole idea of forgiveness as a way to heal is misunderstood. Whether it's necessary or not, in my experience, a lot of people will say it's necessary. You've got to forgive and let go, and other people will say it's not really that necessary. It's kind of it's a scam. Um, there are a lot of opinions. The other thing I've noticed for women, particularly, is that forgiveness often gets couched as a mark of your character. So, if you're a selfish woman, you don't forgive. If you are compassionate and unselfish, then you do. So, it becomes, as I said, a character test, which is not true. Forgiveness is a process. There are 4 stages that you can go through and decide whether or not forgiveness is for you. And that's what we're going to do today. My opinion is that forgiveness is not necessary for healing. However, going through the stages of forgiveness to determine if forgiveness is for you is necessary for healing. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll walk through the 4 stages and talk a little bit about how those stages are different for women. And at the end, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Just going to check the chat. Okay, so let's start. There are 4 stages, as I said, and it's really a process for you. It's a process to help you as the woman who grew up with emotionally immature parents. It's not to help your parents. So let's start with that. So the 4 stages, they're research-based. I can put a link. When I post this video, eventually I'll put a link in the description box. And it starts with a definition, which I'll share. Forgiveness is the readiness process to relinquish the right to blame, demean, or seek revenge against the person causing harm, while simultaneously developing compassion and empathy towards them. So, a couple things to notice about this definition. Um, it's both an internal and external process for you, the woman, going through the forgiveness process, meaning it changes you on the inside. It also changes your behavior on the outside. I also, I think more importantly, want you to take note of what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness does not mean allowing people to mistreat you. It does not mean allowing people to step on your boundaries. And forgiveness is not the same as trust. That is a very important distinction as well to keep in mind. Okay, so the 4 stages. The 4 stages are uncovering, decision, working, and deepening. So let's go through them each. The first stage, uncovering. If you're watching this video, you're probably already in this stage. This is where you start to identify and understand emotionally immature parenting, emotional neglect. This is where you start to uncover probably layers of pain, where you start to have your worldview shifted as to what your childhood was really about. And as you can imagine, excuse me, all of this can be very, very painful. I'll get to coping with that in a second. But let's start with what are some of the actions or activities that you can take in this stage to help you uncover things about your history and about your experience that will be helpful to you. Research is a great way to start. So researching emotional neglect, researching emotionally immature parents. I have a bunch of resources. Again, I'll put in the description box when I post this video. And it's really helpful, I think, to find people either in books or online where you resonate with their experience, because that will help you learn more about your own. Journaling. I'm a huge fan of journaling. Just writing down your experience as a child, writing down your perceptions as an adult, how they change, how they're different. What are the events that are most that are biggest in your memory, that where you feel like you were neglected or where your parents were emotionally immature? If you're stuck there, I love the exercise of setting a timer for 15 minutes and just writing in a journal. Don't take your pen off the paper and see what comes out. Sometimes that can be really enlightening if you're having trouble sort of bringing memories up. Finally, a compassionate witness, talking with a trusted friend, with a trusted family member, with a therapist as well, can be super helpful. I also want to make note, if in this process, anything that comes up, any memories of physical abuse, intimate abuse, sexual abuse, please seek professional care. That's super important. Okay. How do you deal with all this pain and all these memories that you're uncovering? Give yourself grace. This is hard. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So try not to rush through it. Try to take good care of yourself, take good care of your body physically, get the rest that you need, eat the food that you need, get the sunshine, the exercise that you need. That will all go a long way toward helping. And on that note, take breaks. Take your vacations, take your weekends, take time not to think about this as well. Take time to put energy into other parts of your life, because that will help you manage the emotion. But really also, I'll go back to take your time. If you take your time in this stage, really uncovering as much as you can, it will help you in the later stages, and I'll get to that. Okay. Next is the decision stage. This is where you focus more on forgiveness, specifically, what does forgiveness mean to you? And is it important to you? So some actions and activities for this stage are to learn about forgiveness. And you can do that in both a personal way and a general way. So, what are some of the messages that you have received about forgiveness growing up? Perhaps in your faith tradition, perhaps in your family, your grandparents. What are some messages that you received? It also can be really helpful, I think, to explore what forgiveness means in media, in plays, in movies, in books, also online. There are a variety of opinions out there and a variety of stories about what forgiveness looks like. And taking in as many as you can is helpful because it will show you that perhaps this idea that you have of what forgiveness means in your head doesn't necessarily have to be the only thing that's true. There are other options. Another thing to think about is what makes someone worthy of forgiveness to you. That can be a helpful thing to understand. Have you been forgiven? Have you been in that relationship with someone else where you've been forgiven? And what did that look like? And how did your behavior or the other person's behavior play into that? A final action for this stage is to write a letter to yourself from your parents in a journal for nobody's eyes but your own. And in this letter, I want you to imagine that they tell you everything that you want to hear. Um, Perhaps that's apologies. Perhaps that is taking ownership. Perhaps that's just a mission of love in the way that you need to hear it. That's also going to help teach you what forgiveness looks like to you and what behavior you would ideally want to see in your parents to get to forgiveness of forgiving them. Excuse me. Okay, tips for coping in this stage. Again, teasing out forgiveness and trust. What does trust look like to you? What does forgiveness look like to you? What are some of the issues that were big for you as a child? Like, how did you feel emotionally neglected as a child versus how do you feel it now as an adult? That can be helpful. And really, the final aspect of this stage is to consider, are you interested in pursuing forgiveness of your emotionally immature parents? And being able to make that decision, having new information now. So you're not making it based on just what you learned as a child, but what you as an adult woman now understand about forgiveness with the ability to choose what forgiveness means to you. Okay, part three. Part three is the working stage. And this is, there are two parts to this stage: reframing and hard conversations. So, the reframing part of the working stage traditionally gets to reframing your parents' behavior with some additional knowledge that you have now as an adult that you didn't have as a child. So, for example, updating your childhood understanding of what happened to an adult understanding of what happened. Are there events in your parents' life that have contributed to their behavior? Are there messages that they received from their parents that contributed to their behavior? One of the action steps for this stage is reading more about intergenerational trauma and intergenerational patterns and roles. So, are there roles that people play in your family that are being repeated in your family, or perhaps repeated in your aunt's family or your grandfather's family? That can be really helpful in terms of reframing your experience as a child and how your parents' actions may be part of a bigger web, I guess. So that can be helpful. However, here's the caveat. And remember, I said at the beginning that treatment for emotional neglect is often different for women this is one of those places where I feel strongly that it's quite different for women. Because in my experience, and from the 20 women I've interviewed so far, most women who grow up with emotionally immature parents already have a very good understanding of their parents' challenges and struggles. They already have a very good understanding of their parents' past trauma or mistreatment or struggle. So they've already done the reframing in many cases. So the reframing that needs to happen is actually for yourself. Um, and the reframing that needs to happen is trusting that your experience was equally as important as your parents' experience. So your parents' experience of trauma or being raised by their own emotionally immature parents or mistreatment is not any more important than your own experience. And you have to trust that if you felt neglected, you were neglected emotionally. And that's why I always say trust yourself first, because you can't heal if you can't trust your own um, responses to things. The second part of this is forgiving yourself for those times when you were in a conversation with your dad and he said something and you didn't respond in the way that you wish you had. Perhaps you didn't stand up for yourself, or you didn't call him out on his terrible behavior, or whatever it was. And you go home, or you're driving home in the car, and in your head you're spinning and you're replaying the scenario and all of the different things that you wish you'd said. Um, you need to forgive yourself for those times, because you were doing the best you could with the information that you had, and you're still doing the best that you can. So give yourself that grace and that forgiveness. And uh, as an addition to that, I'll say that's part of what I'm hoping to create is a program, something transformational, so that women don't spend their hours in the car driving back from their relationship, from their visits with their parents, replaying conversations in their heads about what they wish they'd said or what they'd wish they'd done, because that just takes up headspace and energy. And that is headspace and energy that you don't have for your nuclear family, your business, your dreams, your whatever it is that you want to do with your own life. Okay, moving on. So that's reframing. The second part of the working phase, as I noticed, I still have old school notes in a notebook, are hard conversations. Hard conversations with your parents. And this is hard. I could probably do a whole video on hard conversations and how to have them, because I've had a lot of them, and they are hard, but they do get easier. And there are actually steps and tips that make it easier. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please leave me a comment. Okay, so think about hard conversations with your parents during the working stage as information gathering. This is the time to take all of the learning and reflecting that you've been doing and think of it as going back to your parents as an adult rather than as a child, to hear some of the stories again, to get some of your questions answered, and equally importantly, to see how they react, because that's going to give you information as well. So some tips, a few tips for setting up these harder conversations. Clarify your motives. What is it you're hoping to get out of this conversation? Set optimal conditions. This could be in person. This could be over the phone. This could be over Zoom. It could be something that you plan, or it could be something that you do on the fly. Different people appreciate different strategies. On that note, have an exit strategy. Perhaps your best friend can call you after 30 minutes, but it's going to help you feel safer to have an exit strategy. And in terms of the actual conversation, lead with curiosity. Try not to make this the time to blame or to plead your case. You're simply here to gather information. You're fact finding. Try to prioritize respect and standing in your parents' or your family members' shoes as best you can. And I know this goes a little bit against what I just said, which is you have to also respect your own experience and really own that. These two things can exist at the same time. Your parents can have their experience of what happened, and you can have your experience of what happened. They don't have to be the same. This is simply a chance for you to learn more about their perceptions without questioning yourself. Another way, this is a, a bit of an exit strategy, actually, but another thing that can be helpful is revisiting what some people call the gem statement. So if you're having this conversation with your parents and you're asking questions and it is getting to a place of conflict or discomfort for you or for them, it can be really helpful to come back to the gem statement. And the gem statement being things that you do connect on. So maybe it's movies or food or politics even. I mean, what are the things that you do agree on? Have sometimes bringing the conversation back to that neutral, safe territory is a good way to shut things down if it's not going the way that you'd hoped. And as another option is to do it through letters. That's actually how I did this process with my own mom, was through letters, and I found it just took the pressure off of both of us. So that could be helpful. Okay, once you get to the end of this stage, it's time to start asking yourself the questions of, are there places where you are ready to relinquish blame? Are there places where you are feeling within yourself that you're able to have more compassion or empathy? Because this brings us to stage 4, which is the deepening stage. The deepening stage is where, just how it sounds, you have a deeper understanding of what emotional neglect is, how it affected you, how being raised with emotionally immature parents has affected you. You also have a deeper understanding of forgiveness and what that means to you as an adult woman. It's a time where you start to identify the things that you've learned from being raised with emotionally immature parents, and even some of the ways that it has helped you in your life, because there are always silver linings to clouds, and the deepening phase is when you start to see that. It doesn't mean that you trust your parents again. It doesn't mean that you have to go back into a relationship with them that they want when you don't want that. It doesn't mean that it dismisses or diminishes any of the neglect that you experienced as a little girl. It simply means that you are able to see the experience through a different lens. And that's really the key to forgiveness if you want to get there. I totally respect that some people don't want to get there. And you may get to the end of the process and decide, I don't want to forgive them. That's not right for me. And that's okay too. Also understand that, as with any stages in healing and recovery, it's not linear. It goes back and forth, and you will perhaps hit the deepening stage on some things, but still be in the uncovering stage in others. So again, give yourself grace. Be patient with yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. When you get to the deepening stage is when you are truly ready to pivot from spending your energy on your family to spending your energy on yourself. And that is really what I wish for all women who've grown up with emotionally immature parents. Have a great week. Just going to check the chat here. Oh, but that's okay. I guess there's nothing.